About creating report cards in the K to 8 grades. We use standards-based grading for these reporting periods. The very first thing that you need to do is to start on your home page. So your start page looks like this. What you will see off to the side are blue octagons with white eyes in them. That contains information about personalized learning plans. What we need to establish is if there are students who have adjusted personalized learning plans or if they have individualized learning plans. If they have adjusted PLPs, then there is a checkbox for the subject on the report card that needs to be checked. If they have an individualized PLP, then IND goes in the score field for that strand or for those strands. So when you click on the blue octagon, you will see a list of students in your class who have a PLP and then the type of PLP that they are on. So for example, this student has an individualized PLP. So I would just note that down somewhere so that I remember. And if you've been working with them and you see them frequently, probably you know that information already because they may come to class sometimes, but not always, or they would be working on completely different material when they are in class. So that is that one class. I would go to my next class and I have another individualized PLP. I would go to my next class and I have an adjusted PLP. What we're looking for when we see an adjusted is that right here is a blue check mark. We do not see a blue check mark on my screen. And what that tells me is that the program where they create the personalized learning plan, which is called ESS Connect, has not written back to PowerSchool to inform PowerSchool that that checkbox needs to be checked. A few years ago, teachers would manually check that checkbox. That is not how the system is supposed to work right now. So if you have been doing this for a while and you're like, yeah, but Angie, we actually just go check that checkbox, you're not supposed to. The programs now are supposed to speak to each other, and ESS Connect is supposed to tell PowerSchool to check that checkbox. So if you have a student who has a PLP adjusted and you do not see a checkbox, please inform your resource teacher so that they can follow up and find out what is happening in ESS Connect that's not doing what it's supposed to do. If we're getting down to crunch time and those report cards need to be printed now and resource hasn't been able to figure out what the problem is or fix it, you can manually check them by clicking on the student's name and then checking this checkbox. You should be able to manually check them. The reason this still exists is so that if a student has a PLP created, but then comes off that PLP, or if it was created in error, you can uncheck that box. So it is our responsibility as teachers to make sure that if there's a student who has a PLP adjusted, that checkbox is checked.
You're awesome. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Mary, can you mute yourself? Thanks, Mary.
Sorry, I apologize.
No worries. It happens all the time. But you shouldn't really be checking the box to indicate they do have an adjusted unless your resource team has followed up with Kate Zed, who is the coach for ESS Connect, and they can't figure out why it's not checking. Any questions about PLPs and what you should know before you start doing your report cards? Okay, so once you have double checked that your PLP accommodated have a checkbox and you have noted down on a piece of paper or somewhere where you can see it who has individualized plans, you're ready to start creating your report cards. You create report cards in PowerTeacher Pro, And you can see on my screen that there are several links to PowerTeacher Pro. There's no wrong link. The link to the left will take you to the generic or default class. The link underneath the class will take you directly to that class. So if, for example, you are ready to work with Social Studies 7 specifically, then you could click that link and it would take you directly to Social Studies 7. If you're just starting and it doesn't really matter who you start with, and you click the one on the left, it's going to take you to your default, which in my case is at another school. So I would want to then change to this school. If you are a K-5 teacher, homeroom is going to matter. If you are a 6-8 teacher, homeroom doesn't matter. So K-5 teachers will do their learning habits in the homeroom for each of their homeroom students. They will also write a comment for each of their homeroom students. In 6-8, you don't do this in the homeroom because you do it for each subject. So we will talk to that when I get to the grade 7 social studies course. If you are doing learning habits in the homeroom because you're a K-5 teacher, you're going to get a screen like this. One thing I find about PowerTeacher Pro is it's not incredibly intuitive. It doesn't tell you what you need to do when you land on a screen. However, if you click on an empty cell, what you are able to do will show over on the right. So for example, I just clicked on this cell and null came up as an option. That means I do nothing in this column. These columns are pre-filled automatically, so we do nothing in those columns. I did not mention this, and I really should because it's important. Each time you go to do your report cards, the first thing you should check is that you are working in the right reporting term. So we are doing our report cards now for T1. If you log into PowerTeacher Pro and you notice it says T2 or T3, make sure you click on the drop down and change it to T1. Every single reporting term, I have teachers contact me and say, I accidentally put my marks in the wrong reporting term. And I feel awful because I know how much time it takes to do these report cards, but there is no fast way to move it over. If you put your comments and your grades in the wrong reporting term, you have to move the comments one at a time, cut, paste, and you have to move the grades or the performance indicators over one column at a time. So please, you will save yourself a lot of heartache if you double check your reporting term each time you go in. When I move to the next column and I click on the box, the only option that becomes available to me is comments. So that means what goes in this column are my student comments. I'm going to be sending a document out to teachers. It's the Assessing, Evaluating, and Reporting document that EECD creates. In that document, there are guidelines and comment starters and verbs and examples of comments. So you have some exemplars to look at. The structure of comments should be strengths, needs, next steps. So what is the student already good at? Congratulations, these are the things that you are good at. Needs, these are the things that maybe you're struggling with or could do better at or could improve at. And how are you going to get there? What are your next steps so that you can improve those needs? The request from the Department of Education is that these comments are personalized. We do know as educators that often there are similar situations between students, and the program is designed to help you out if you have similar comments. So let's say that in my homeroom, and I'm just going to make my screen bigger. There, that's a little better. Let's say in my homeroom that when I'm thinking about the learning habits for my students, and I think about Owen or Orlando, and Olivia, that these students are very similar. Or maybe for the most part, my class is really, really good at being responsible for their things. But maybe they all seem to be struggling with taking initiative. So if there is a portion of the comment that you want to be the same for multiple people in the class, you can write the comment and then pre-fill it into certain boxes. So it's called Smart Text, and it works like this. You must use the student's first name as it appears in PowerSchool. So for example, I could say Nicholas is capable of keeping track of his belongings and has no issues remembering to bring materials to class, because this is a learning habit comment, not a subject comment. Remembering to bring materials to class. And then maybe I would say something else. He struggles with, and then finish the comment. If I hit fill right now, it's going to put this same comment into all the other comment boxes that are empty, changing the first name to the new first name as it applies to that row. It will also change the pronoun to the pronoun we have on file for that student. So if I hit fill, comments only, use Smart Text, and then hit OK, we can see those blue flags have become visible in every cell for the comment column. And if I click into one of those, I will see that for Nick, it says Nick is capable, and Owen is capable, and Piper is capable. However, after teaching Nathaniel all term, I don't really feel that, being responsible is really his strength. So now I'm going to change this comment for this student, and I'm going to personalize it to something different. I might need to also personalize this comment. So if it's a majority of the students in your room and a portion of your comment that you want to be generic, Smart Text pre-fill is an option for you. The caution being this: if your student has a different name, a different preferred name, they will not appear in the comments. And if the student's pronoun or the preferred pronoun is not the pronoun that was entered when they were registered in PowerSchool, then that he, she will not appear for them appropriately. And if the student's pronouns or gender was not entered at all into PowerSchool, what will appear will be he/she. So it won't have a pronoun singular, it'll be generic he/she. Any questions about Smart Text or pre-fill? Should we be using gender neutral terms if they have gender on file? That's really not a question for me. That's something I would talk to your guidance counselor or your principal about. I can tell you what the program does. It's not my place to tell you what you should be doing as far as gender pronouns. Sorry, I know that's a terrible political answer, but I don't want to give you an answer that your administration would not agree with. When it is, when you have finished all your comments, you can then move to the next, and you don't have to do it in this order. You could choose to do your learning habits first. You could choose to do your comments first. You could do comments for one thing and then do the comments in the rest of your classes before doing the grades. Really, it's up to you, the order. When we look at the learning habits, if you want to know what learning habit you're about to comment on or grade, you can hover over at the top When I hover over, do you guys see that little window pop up that says independence?
Yes.
Should we use the name that's in PowerSchool or use preferred names? Again, not for me to answer because it depends on why they have a preferred name. If you have a student who has a preferred name because they are a transgendered student, I can tell you what I personally would do. What I personally would do is not necessarily in alignment with 713, so I'm not going to answer that question. I would ask your principals those questions. Sorry. What we have for each learning habit is a scale of C, U, S, and R. And in the document I'm going to send to you, it'll explain what C, U, S, and R means, but I'll tell you, and then you can take a look at it later. C is consistently, U is usually, S is sometimes, and R is rarely. Consistently means almost all the time, rarely means almost never, sometimes is less than half of the time, usually is more than half the time. So if you're looking at Nicholas and you're thinking about his independence and you think, you know what, he is usually independent. I give the class a task and he does it. And very rarely do I have to circle back to him to get him started. And he will ask me if he actually needs my help. Then you would put a usually or a consistently, depending on how often he does that. If he hardly ever, but does sometimes, then maybe you'd put an S for sometimes. Just like the comments, pre-fill is an option in here. So if you're thinking about independence and your class as a whole, and you think to yourself, you know what, the majority of my students are a usually, and you want to pre-fill that, it will put it in each of the blank spots. So if I have my outliers filled in first, so these are the students that really don't conform to the majority rule, and I put those in there, and then I pre-fill, it will only pre-fill the empty boxes. And I would continue to do that for all 6 learning habits. So one of them is independence, one of them is initiative, one of them is interactions, organization, and responsibility. And then I move into the next column, and for K to 5 class, you're going to see FLC, FLC1. And when I hover over that, I get some more information that this is French language and culture, and that this participates in learning experiences to introduce French language and culture. When I click on this FLC, I'm going to get null as an option. So that tells me I do nothing in this column. But when I click in here, I have yes, no, not applicable. And if I were to actually scroll over or put in more, there should be another option. There's not. There should be another option that says FLC2, and it's a Flora program option. So if your school is specifically doing Flora, then you would use that column. If they're not doing Flora, but you are exposing them to French, so maybe in math, you will teach them how to count in French. Or sometimes you'll teach them the terms in French. Maybe in social studies, you teach them the province names in English and in French. Then if that's the case, you would put yes. And probably if you're doing it for one student, you're doing it for all. So you would pre-fill that column. If you're not doing it, then just leave it blank. I know that no and not applicable are options here, but you don't have to put anything in unless it's a yes. A no, a not applicable, and a blank will all do the same thing on the report card. It will not check off the box that says French learning opportunities. I'm just going to pause for a second and go see the question in the... Yep, that's no problem. Yeah, just send me an email, Mary. So I did email you back. Send me an email with 2 or 3 times that you're available, and I'll schedule a one-on-one meeting for us. Okay, so K to 5 report cards. homerooms done by the homeroom teacher. Any questions about doing your homeroom report card K-5 teachers only? Okay, I'm going to move on to a subject. So when we look at the other courses, and we're all done with, you know what, I'm going to show you. If I move to another class and I haven't saved my data, I will get this message. So I physically have to discard the changes or save and continue. The program is set up to not allow you to mistakenly or as an accident not save your data. So at this point, I'm going to choose to save and continue. And now I'm moving into one of my subjects. So this is English Language Arts in grade 3. And it looks a lot like the homeroom because the structure is very similar. So in English Language Arts grade 3, I have an empty cell. When I click on it, and remembering that if these cells are already filled, we don't put anything in there. So these are not used for grades. Click on this cell. The only option is comments. And comments for the subjects are exactly like comments for the homeroom. What is a student's strength in your subject area? What is a need for your student in your subject area? And what are the next steps to improve that need? Smart text works in these cells just like it does in the homeroom. And it only works, Angie, if you actually spell student's name right. So that's actually a good point to make. This says Nicholas. If I put Nick in here and I pre-fill it and I go to look at any of the other comments, they are all going to say Nick because you must use the student's name as it appears in PowerTeacher Pro. I'm going to pop out of here and then pop back in so that it doesn't save those changes. So if you've done something, you're like, that's not what I wanted to do. You can't just delete the comment in the cell because once you save a comment in the cell, that smart text feature is gone. You don't have the ability to pre-fill anymore. So if you did it and when you look at these comments and it's got the wrong name, don't save it, go to another class, discard your changes, and then go back into this course. That's why when you've confirmed that you've done something and you're happy with it, you should save it. Because if I were to do all my grading marks, then do my comments, realize my comments were wrong, and I didn't want to delete them all one at a time, as soon as I moved into the other class, I can't save my grades, but delete my comments. So if you kind of think about your report card in chunks, if you do your comments in a chunk, your learning habits in a chunk, and your grading in a chunk, and then save each chunk separately, you will save yourself some time and heartache. So comments in a subject area, K to 8 are all the same. You put in the comment. If you're not pre-filling, that's okay. That means you're doing more individualized comments, and that's fantastic. The next column says yes, no, not applicable. What's that column, Angie? When we look at this, it says EAL. And we don't really use the term EAL to apply to students anymore. We usually talk about MLLs, so multi-language learners. But the report card was built before we switched that terminology. And this column is asking you, is this student learning English as another language? So maybe it's their second or their third or the fourth or fifth language, but they're still learning English. It's okay if they're learning English and they can still express to you the things they do and don't know. So if their English is so good that you know and are able to assess them, you know what they know, you understand what they're demonstrating, you're able to assess them, then you put nothing in this column. And I understand that there's a no and an NA, but no, NA, and blank all do the same thing. It does not check the box on the report card that says EAL. A yes will check a box on the report card that says EAL. And what that yes is telling us is that the student is participating in class. They're doing as much as they're able, but as a teacher, you don't know what they can and can't do because their language skills impede you from understanding their level of understanding. Does that make sense? I'm just going to cough for a moment, sorry. So that's what the EAL column is for. And you may find a student is not able to demonstrate what they know, or they can't demonstrate mastery of the strands in English language arts, but maybe they can in math. Maybe math is that universal language that they are able to demonstrate that they fully understand. This is subject specific. So if their learning English impacts this particular subject, then they get a yes in this column. If it doesn't impact this subject, then you leave it blank. You can put in no or not applicable, but you're just making extra work for yourself. The next column is where our strands columns will start. And in this column, it says null, so we do nothing. We move to the next column. And that's where we see our first 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'll notice that the 1 is currently grayed out. Okay, but what are we actually assessing? So English language arts under the old curriculum had a strand called speaking and listening. That strand is now called interactions. So if you are a holistic school and you hover here, you will see interactions. If you are not a holistic school, you will still see speaking and listening. When you click on this cell, you have the option to put in a 1, you have the option to put in a 2, you have the option to put in a 3, and when you check off the 3, the plus now becomes available, or you can assess them at a 4, or you can assess them at a 4+. Just like all of the other columns, pre-fill is an option. So if the student or the majority of students in your class has a 3, you can pre-fill as a 3. If you then go back, you can change the ones who are not a 3. Maybe they're a 3+. Maybe they're a 4. Maybe they're a 4+. And I'm going to see or hear people out there saying, no, Angie, sorry, we're not allowed to use 4+. 4+ are on the provincial rubric. In the eyes of the Department of Education and in the district, a 4+ is a grade you can give a student. Do we see 4+ often? No, we don't see them often. They're for the exceptional. But if a student is in grade 3 and they are reading at a grade 9 level, then probably they're a 4+. If they fit the description on the provincial rubric as a 4+, you are able to give them a 4+. Your administrators might like a heads up. So your administration may tell you, if you're going to give a 4+, please let us know who you're giving those to. We just want to double check for consistency and quality assurance that we're handing out 4+ when we should be. That's okay, nothing wrong with that. But I hear a lot of teachers say to me, we've been told you're not allowed to give a 4+. That is absolutely false, not true. 4+ do exist. We have some very brilliant students in our system. Likewise, there are also students who come in at the assessment as a 1. My word of caution with a 1 is if you're going to assess a student and you feel that their performance warrants a 1, please talk to your resource department, because there might be an underlying condition that's preventing that student from demonstrating their knowledge. And if that student isn't on a PLP, the question might want to be asked, should they be? Likewise, if you're going to give a 1 and you talk to your resource department, probably it would be good to consider whether or not you have contacted anybody at home up until this point. My advice is always, don't ever shock a parent. If you think your parents understand where their students are, and you've had conversations with them and they understand that they're probably a 2 or a 1, no problem, because you've had those conversations. But I will tell you from personal experience, my son, we were out in KV, and he was a strong student. He was always a strong student, and in his writing and in his reading, he was a 3+. We changed schools, and we came into another school, and he got 2 2s on his report card, and I had no idea that he wasn't doing well. There was no conversations with me. I would ask him when he came home, "Hey, how was today?" And he'd be like, "Oh, it was great. We did this, this, and this." So it's just saves you from a difficult conversation and parent-teacher that if you have a student who's underperforming, letting the parents know in advance is going to save you those confrontational conversations. And that one should just be an indication to talk to resource and make sure that there isn't something that somebody's missing. You would continue to fill in your strands and making any changes that you need to make. Any questions about doing that? So the last one I wanted to talk to you about, remember back when I asked you to note who was a student on an individualized plan? And I believe it was this student right here. So this student is on an individualized plan. We actually don't assess them here. Instead, we would put IND. IND indicates individualized, and that would be something you would comment on in the course comments. You would say something along the lines of, Piper is working away on the goals set for them in their personalized learning plan. These goals will be updated and reported on in the attachment to the report card. So IND students have their goals updated in ESS Connect, and then they're printed off and stapled to the report card. If you are teaching a subject, and I'm going to flip over here now to social studies. If you are teaching a subject, and let me just take a look. Yeah, okay, this is the old course. Okay. So if you are teaching a subject like social studies or math, where there's sequential learning in the sense that maybe you're not doing every strand in every reporting term, and I'll use math as an example because math teachers almost always start out with numbers, and they almost never get to stats and probability until the T3 reporting term. So if you have not done any content under a strand, then you would leave that cell or that column blank. So let's, for example, say in this course, when I look at my options, I have knowledge and skills, so it doesn't really apply here. But if you're thinking about math or the new social studies that has like Wabanaki or economics, and you haven't talked about economics yet in Social Studies 7, you would leave that whole column blank. It means we haven't even looked at it. If you have looked at it, but you don't have enough collected data to determine what their grade should be, then you would put an NA, no assessment possible. If you have a student whose attendance makes it impossible for you to assess, you would put an NA. So as a class, we have done material in this strand, but this student has not been here and or refuses to do work, and therefore I have nothing to assess them with. Word of caution. If you cannot assess a student because they're refusing to do work, I would make sure that you've had conversations with your administration and the home, and that you've tried your Tier 1 interventions to try to get that student to work. After you've tried some Tier 1 interventions, if you're still not getting any work out of the student, then you would do an ESS team referral. So you'd refer them to the educational support team in your building so that they can look at other interventions for that student. Again, don't ever want to surprise anybody with a report card. This should be stuff that's communicated between the start of the year and the report card. But at the end of the day, if you sit down to determine their marks and Caitlin has not handed one thing in, you can't assess them. Or if at the end of the day you sit down to determine their marks and Kayla has been absent for 90% of the classes, you can't assess them. So you would put NA. Any questions about that? You guys are super quiet. Okay. That's essentially it for grades. The only other thing that I would mention is that if you are a 6 to 8 teacher, so this is a Social Studies 7 class, you will see those learning habits with every subject. So for grade 6, 7, and 8 courses, you do your comment the same way I have described. When you click on the next column, you'll see that this is a learning habits column with a null, so you can't do anything there. And then you do the 6 learning habits and however many strands you have for that course. So every subject course has learning habits for students in 6 to 8. Any questions at this time? Because this really concludes my information to give to you, and now I'm happy to answer questions. If there's anybody listening and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're like, oh, I still don't know what to do, that's not a problem at all. My job is to help. Send me an email and include in that email 2 or 3 times that you're available. I'll schedule a PowerTeacher meeting and we'll jump into a call like this. If a PowerTeacher meeting. I meant a Teams meeting, sorry. If a Teams meeting really isn't your jam or it isn't how you learn best and you want me to come over in person with enough notice, I can do that. It would be better for me to come in person if I could come over and talk to 4 or 5 people at one time, but if that's not possible, that's okay. So I got 2 questions in the chat. Number before comments or comments will not print out right. Thank you. That is a really important thing to remember. A lot of teachers will do their comments first and then they'll go check their report cards because they want to see how the comments align in the comment box. If you have written a comment in this column, but you have not put any data in the strands columns, those comments will not print on the report card. So if you have a student who never shows up and you write a really long comment about this student is never in class, I'm not able to assess what they know due to their attendance, but you have not put NA here, that comment will never print on the report card. So frantically, every reporting term, I get a message from a teacher, Angie, I've done all my comments and they're not showing up on the report card. And then I will go and ask them, have you done your strand grades yet? And they'll go, yeah, no. And then that's the reason they're not showing on the report card. Thank you for that reminder. I'm trying to remember what other questions I get, because inevitably I get the same question over and over several times. Holistic curriculum question here. I see how interactions has replaced speaking and listening in ELA, sorry. As far as you know, is it still speaking and listening in French immersion? That's how it looks. Yeah, so my understanding is that FILA and PIF did not follow suit with English Language Arts. When English Language Arts met as subject area coordinators and the department people at EECD, they also met with APSI and they discussed the inclusiveness of speaking and listening because not all students can speak and not all students can listen. If they have a hearing impairment, then they're not listening and you can't grade them on listening, but they can interact. So to be more inclusive, they changed that language to interaction. But my understanding is that FILA and PIF have not gone there yet. Anything else? I'm currently in a room with people doing other things, but wanted to let you know. Oh, great. Thank you so much. Anything else? Any other questions? You can just jump in and unmute
Angie.
yourself and ask. Yeah, go ahead, Melanie.
You mentioned, someone had mentioned that they wanted help entering assignments for the parent portal. Did you did you say that you were giving a session on that, or?
Okay, so two things. At the K-8 level, PowerTeacher Pro assignments would be for the teacher and the administrator access only. There's only one school in the district that is displaying assignments out to parents. So if you do use PowerTeacher Pro, unless you're at Quispamsis Middle School, nobody sees that but you and your administrators. I can do a session on PowerTeacher Pro and how to create assignments. I'm happy to do that. And to be perfectly honest, I think PowerTeacher Pro is a great way to record your grades electronically. It's a secure database. It goes with you anywhere in Canada that you take your work computer. You can't lose grades. I have a tendency to put things down and walk away from them, so a paper grade book can often go missing for me. So yeah, PowerTeacher Pro and creating assignments, I'm happy to do a session on that. And I can send that out as an email if you'd like. Outside the province, you can access PowerTeacher and PowerTeacher Pro. You can access anywhere in Canada, provided that you are using your NB-Ed computer. So if, for example, you're going to a conference in Toronto and you take your work computer with you, the only thing that you need to make sure is that once you're connected to the Wi-Fi, that I'm just going to see if I'm going to share my other screen for a second. I'm going to show you what has to be. Give me 2 seconds and I'm going to share this screen over here. So if you are outside of the GMB network or the NVED network, sorry, I got to take over.
So, sorry, just to interrupt you, it's my question. I haven't been issued a computer yet, so that's...
Then you can't access PowerTeacher or PowerTeacher Pro at all anywhere. You
Okay.
need an NB-Ed account. You need an NB-Ed computer. Now you could use like a desktop in your building. How long have you been teaching?
Since the beginning of September.
And you still don't have...
I'm not working in the province yet. I am moving there in 10 days.
Okay. So when you arrive in the province, you'll be issued an NB-Ed computer. And when that happens, if you are working from home or outside the province, this SNB is a VPN. So
Okay.
It moves you behind the department firewall so that you can work in PowerTeacher Pro.
Perfect.
And
okay.
If you click on it and it doesn't say that it's connected, then you just check the box and hit connect. When you're at school, it won't be connected because you're behind the firewall already. So when you're at home, just check that box, hit connect, and then you'll be good to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Just another quick question.
Yeah.
I had 3 o'clock dismissal and I had a child that couldn't zip his book bag. So when I ran away from the computer, when I came back, you were talking about something, yes, no, and it had nothing to do with EAL. It was, I think I can go back and watch the video once it's posted.
No, it's okay. I can go back to the yes, no. So there are 2 options where you would use yes, no, or not applicable. One of them is in the homeroom for K-5 teachers, and it's that French learning box. So here, when I click on it, it says null, but if I go to the next one, it says participates in learning experiences to introduce French language and culture. So if you're a K-5 teacher, maybe you're teaching grade 3 and you incorporate French into your classes. So let's say you teach social studies and you teach them the names of the province in English and in French. Then you can click this box, yes, and it would indicate that they are getting exposure to French, even though they're not in French immersion.
Okay, so for instance, my school at Vincent Massey, like I have French posters in my classroom and the kids asked me to go to the washroom in French and fill their water bottle in French. But another thing we're doing, they do Flora every day for 30 minutes. And then we have a French language assistant in the school who offers a half hour twice a week. So an extra hour of French, and the teacher participates in that.
Wonderful.
So how does that work?
So I'm in the training environment right now, and the training environment doesn't have everything our report card has. So on our report card, there are 2 columns here. One will say French learning opportunities, and the second one says Flora. And you would say yes in both, because they are specifically doing the Flora program, but then they're also getting more than the Flora program. So you would just put yes in both.
Oh, okay. So that's what that was for. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions? So again, my name is Angie Cameron. You can email me. It's just angie.cameron@nbed.nb.ca. If you have questions, you can send them to me via email. You can send them to me on Teams. If you want a one-on-one meeting or a small group meeting, you can send me a request, and I will try my very best to schedule that for you. If you're new to creating report cards, my biggest piece of advice is don't wait. Chunk it and do a little bit at a time. So maybe you're going to do 1 class's learning habits today, and then tomorrow you're going to do another classes. But I would start on those as soon as you're able, because they're not hard, they're time consuming. They take a long time to do. And that half day that's provided at the end of November will not be sufficient. It will take you much longer than that to do them. So you'll need to devote some of your prep time between now and then to doing your report cards. And if there's no other questions, then feel free to pop out. And if you do want to ask a question, feel free to stick around.
It was very informative today.